we're not looking to brand Button. We're looking to create a seamless experience that habituates users to an action that is more valuable back to the publisher.
Today, I'm joined by Jonathan Shottan, the Chief Product Officer from the NYC commerce tool Button. Welcome. Thanks very much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Would you mind starting off by telling us what Button is?
Yeah, Button is a company that's really on a mission setting out to build an internet powered by actions and not ads. And really what that means is we support both publishers and brands on two sides of a marketplace. Publishers that are looking to embed a commerce value proposition and habituate a value back to users on their platform that instantiates a value on top of intent, taking an action and monetizing it. Sure. And on the other end, working with merchants, with brands, with retailers that are looking to extend their reach and find an audience that is relevant to them.
Yeah, sure. That's great. And so this is a very specific sort of product, the one that you've just described, and I'd be interested to see what the competitor landscape looks like from your perspective. Who's in there? Is there anyone doing the same thing as you guys, do you reckon?
Yeah, I don't know if there's anyone doing the exact same thing that we're doing, which is both a really fun position to be in, but also a challenging one. We can talk a little bit about that. But sure. I think since we're on both sides of the marketplace, you can really run the gamut in terms of who a competitive set are. I think for merchants or retailers trying to find an audience, you can look at a company like a Shopify, which is kind of an out-of-the-box solution that allows them to build a retail value proposition, both in kind of the traditional ways, but also kind of on a direct-to-consumer relationship aspect. And sure. If you look at it on the publisher end, really that's where you fall into more of the traditional affiliate side, where individual publishers can kind of build the relationships with brands through kind of a one-to-one value proposition with retailers that way. I don't think there's any one company out there outside of Button that's really building an out-of-the-box solution that helps publishers monetize and helps retailers find an audience through a technical integration, especially in mobile, and that's where our sweet spot is.
Sure. And just on that point, while we're there, would you do as a quick rundown of what you would class as a publisher and what you would class as a brand in this instance? So from a very kind of standard procedures.
Absolutely, a publisher is a company that is producing content that creates a value proposition for users, customers, retailers. Well, hopefully customers and retailers, or hopefully customers or consumers rather. But they're producing content that drives people to their site. That could be a company in the financial services like a Monzo or an Acorns, or in kind of traditional publishing like a CNN or sure. I don't know, the Sun for you guys. On the brand and on the retailer side, that's a company that's producing a good or a service that is looking to sell it.
Sure. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. That's perfect. And so you personally are you run product at Button.
I do.
So could you talk a little bit about your trajectory thus far? How did you arrive here? What sort of made up your experience up until that point? And why do you feel qualified to do this?
Yeah, qualified. I barely feel qualified to tie my shoes. But let me take a step back. So I'll digress for a moment. I actually met our CEO, Michael Giacone, about 5 years ago when I was leading the monetization efforts at a company out of the States called Pinterest. Yeah. He and I met, and I thought, like, right at the moment where he met, he was onto something pretty special, which is, for a company like Pinterest, and the reason that we were discussing a conversation there, there's so much latent intent on so many different platforms that exist out there. And Mike Giacone and the founding team at Button were really onto something special. Now, they were a little bit early, but they thought that there's just a better way to conduct a business in mobile in particular, but the internet at large. Sure. And what he described was what we're actually trying to build today, which is a mechanism that creates as performant a value proposition as advertising, but through means that are just fundamentally more aligned with consumer value propositions.
Okay.
But I'll go back a little bit to my career trajectory. I've been very lucky to work at some of the leading companies, well, in the United States or maybe the world, but I spent time at Facebook as a product leader over there running a division called Outcomes. Outcomes was comprised of 3 functions, insights, measurement, and targeting, all built around the concept that we were trying to create better outcomes for advertisers. I then joined Pinterest. I got a little bit over 4 years at Pinterest, focused initially on building out their monetization platform, and then I took over the global growth function for the company, managing about 100 people, geo-distributed in kind of 7 different offices around the world, which was a really amazing experience in watching the company scale from about 100 people when I joined to maybe about 1,700 people when I left. Wow. And so that was really fun. But really, none of that gave me anything other than a foundation on which to do my job now at Button, which is hopefully find another inflection point and scale another company.
Sure.
Yeah.
There's a whenever I speak to product managers, especially early stage ones, people like myself who've not been in the game for very long, we try and sort of scramble and hold on to something which resembles, your thing, what you're good at within the product sphere.
Yeah.
Sounds then that you would say that or maybe your initial career was dedicated around this growth function, right? Would you say that was where your skill was? Would you?
I don't know if that's where my skill was. I think I have a knack for a few things. One of them is helping people draw lines between kind of a North Star, like a vision that's 2, 3, 4 years out in the future, and create kind of steps between where you are today and where you need to, like what you need to do next in order to get to that growth point.
Sure.
I think in building that narrative, if you will, I have found an ability to kind of move disparate teams and organize them collectively to create value. And so, like, if I have any one skill, it's in kind of that
Sure.
that area of organization. And for a company like Button, which operates a 2-sided marketplace with a lot of competition on each side and so many options in terms of what we could do, I feel like I'm in the right place at the right time.
That's great. That's really cool. The other side of that is I found that there were people who real domain sort of specialists.
Sure.
Kind of is that something that you've found you've had to learn over time, or is that something a little bit have you always been able to understand that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Especially for product managers, right?
Yeah.
Because there's this classical view that a product manager should be somebody that comes out with a technical degree, spends a couple of years working kind of in the trenches on engineering, and then potentially goes and does an MBA.
Sure.
My background is very different. I actually studied liberal arts and then joined something called the Peace Corps in the United States, spent some time in West Africa before I fell into product. Sure. For me, and kind of the ability to understand complex ideas and translate them to, again, a narrative that compels action. That for me is the value proposition that the best product managers bring to the table.
Excellent.
The discrete knowledge base that one builds in spending time in one specific area over another, that's required, and that's required so that you can drive action and make decisions that align to positive outcomes, and you don't want people to call BS on what you're saying, but I don't think any one person needs to come in with a tremendous amount of specific knowledge in order to be successful in the role. Did I answer the question?
I think you did,
I
did
kind
very
of
well.
went sideways there.
No, that sounds completely correct. I think that'll probably be a very reassuring thing for a lot of maybe junior product people who are not from that more technical background that you described, to find a way to sort of to find their niche.
I do just one thing there, because I don't want to dismiss that it's important.
Sure.
Like, the best product managers become students of their vocation. So while you don't necessarily need to start with technical understanding or a deep kind of data science or engineering background, it is important in whatever environment you land as you start out as a product manager to really take it seriously that your job is to know this space better than anybody else.
Sure.
Why? Because people are going to be looking to you to synthesize an answer with a whole bunch of information coming in your way. So it is, while potentially daunting, I do think anybody can do the job if they put effort behind it.
For sure, absolutely. Cool. And so onto Button itself and the way that your product and design team sort of look and behave. How have you set that out, and kind of what do they look like in terms of makeup?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're a growing company, so things are fluid. In case anybody from the company sees this and tells me I'm wrong, but we've set it up in kind of a classic triumvirate form, which is that for every team that is building against a set of kind of problems and trying to define solutions, we have an engineering lead, a product lead, and a design lead.
Right.
And the three of them are supposed to be working together to basically define roadmaps, where on any given team, the value proposition that one of those three brings to the table is sometimes a little different because of how the solution needs to manifest to the end consumer of the product.
Sure.
But my expectation and hope is that a designer is bringing in the voice of the kind of the customer and a set of systematized thinking, design thinking, if you will. The product manager is bringing the scaffolding that creates the right organization behind the objectives, the goals, the hypothesis, the requirements to achieve a set of outcomes. And the engineering lead is bringing in, the engineering, but not to be glib about it, but really bringing in a critical eye on how to solve the problem.
Sure. Okay, that seems like a very natural sort of format. How involved will you get in that then? Are you the kind of guy who likes to let these people run, or do you like to be involved in those decisions?
Yeah, I'll change altitude depending on the particular problem or kind of the importance as I see it. I like to have one or two projects that I get deeply involved in, just to retain a level of kind of sharpness in my own skill set, my own vocation. But I really do like to let teams kind of run independently. What is required in order to have successful outcomes is that in order to allow a team to run independently, they have to be crystal clear about what their mission is, how they expect to achieve that mission through a vision statement, like what their metrics are, how they measure those metrics, what their project plans are. And then it's incumbent on the product managers within that function to basically elevate any potential misalignments or disagreements where they can't resolve them by themselves in order to create traction for the team.
Sure.
As much as I like to kind of float above in a sense and let teams operate effectively, I can only do that if I have the information flowing up. And importantly, if teams are kind of having those horizontal conversations that allow them to move quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and the general sort of product goals you touched on there, you have certain things you want to sort of aim for, you've got certain metrics that you want to track. Anything in particular that you're trying to measure? How do you decide what you want to build and why, that kind of thing?
There's the kind of the general answer here, I think, which is if we as a company, if any company has defined a really clear set of outcomes or objectives, whether they are at the 1 year out level, 3 years out level, or 1 quarter out level, what we should build moves us in that direction, or at least has a hypothesis that can be proven or disproven in terms of a set of feature functionality or solutions that move the needle. What we build is always like there's a classical product management problem, and I wish I could sketch on a piece of paper here, but in an environment as crowded as the one in which Button plays, where there's a lot of competitive value on kind of either side of this marketplace, a product manager can look, at every competitor and see that each one of these companies has developed a suite of functionality where each component feature of that suite delivers some value proposition. And so it's easy to fall into the trap to just kind of lay out this line of features and say, we're going to start building each one of these features because then we'll have the same value. Now the problem is, if you do that, like what you forget is that each one of those other companies is also moving forward against a new set of feature functionality. And so it kind of becomes an impossible game of catch up where you're always trying to build against something that's already been done. And so the classic problem, and in terms of organizing value around what to build, is it is important to know kind of that baseline set of feature functionality and what's important for either the existing partner base that operates with the company or the ones that you want to go after. But even more importantly, it's important to rationalize from a first principles perspective, what is the unique value that you can build against that allows you to leapfrog against that value continuum, if you will, so that you could build fewer things that return more value.
Yeah.
And then it becomes like a weighted cost where, hey, we're gonna chase down these 5 things that we know deliver value, and we're gonna make a bet on this other thing that we expect to deliver significant value, but we'll have to move the market in a direction to do it, or we'll have to convince other people, or whatever it is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. And to touch on that just a little bit before we move on, the idea there of designing or to build for sort of two directions, in the sense you have a brand and a publishing, sort of dependent in a sense.
Yeah.
Any particular sort of anything that you've found from working with this, incredibly diverse range of businesses?
Yeah.
Anything which has been super sort of interesting or intriguing about that process?
Well, my hair was falling out, but
Oh, don't say that.
yeah. Well, no, it's like I used to just this morning I had hair like yours. What have I learned from that? I've learned that it's important to find, and I'll use kind of like an MBA term here, like the synergies, if you will. What are the set of things that you can build that move value across both sides?
Sure.
It's important that you take enough of a view from an altitude that's high enough that allows you to see how, when you weight a set of solutions on one side of the market or the other, they play off against each one of them. And it's another thing that is becoming, important and clear to me. And I've got to be careful because my CEO is going to get upset if I say you have to give things away for free. But it's important to build things that are valuable because they're valuable, not because you can generate a value on top of them. If that makes sense, or the distinction there makes sense. Because I think a company like Button, which is kind of setting out to do something that is slightly unique and move a market which is slow to move, really needs to weight itself against the value that's created in the ecosystem.
Sure.
Because I think that when there's a groundswell, when there is value, good things happen down the road.
Absolutely. And that's a really interesting point there, which is, I feel that the product managers that I speak to always seem to have this sort of set of contrasting sort of pulls on them. One from their own sort of logic, which says we build this thing even if it's not the most commercially valuable, and then the stakeholders who are saying, how can we monetize this one thing that you can build, that kind of thing. And then finding that balance between those two things and how to communicate the value that maybe isn't commercially as intrinsic as some of these other things must be a real challenge, right?
It's a real challenge. It's I wish I had a glib or a pithy response to kind of encapsulate how to do it.
Yeah, sure.
I'll fall back to kind of that narrative. If you can draw lines that are clear and demonstrate kind of accretive value, one thing after the next, one foot after the other, towards a vision or a North Star that you're trying to achieve. Well, if one thing doesn't necessarily immediately translate to value, but is accretive to the next step, I think it becomes a little bit easier.
For sure.
But the real rub is when your chief revenue officer comes down and says hey, I need to do this or I need to do that, and and that's kind of the set of trade-offs.
For sure.
Yeah.
So, and a really nice jump-off point there for looking at how this sort of two-sided marketplace that you mentioned works. We're going to take a look in this particular instance at the link up that you've facilitated between Acorns and Uber Eats. So we start off with a sort of this Acorns page. You've got this beautiful design language which Acorns have lovingly put in place for you. And then this marketplace here where we can see a whole host of merchants or brands. And scrolling down, first of all, there's a lot of them. So I guess that in itself is a commercial challenge.
Yeah.
But the user settles on an Uber Eats in this instance, and then we click below, and once we've installed the app, we're able to start using the product.
That's right.
So getting started with Uber Eats, we're in the States, so we've got our kind of +1 code here, enter our mobile number, a real nice, slick process. And then just while we're on this point here, how much of this is you guys, sort of putting those kind of design constraints in, or not constraints, but putting those design sort of requirements in front of these people?
Yeah.
And how much is it those guys sort of saying this is our sort of requirements for that sort of thing?
Well, it's a little of both, but
Yeah.
importantly, we build the rails that
Yeah.
allow for these integrations to happen as seamless as what you just saw there.
Yeah.
That deep link post the tap that is attributed back to Acorns.
Yeah.
No other company today has that same level of kind of deep embedded functionality that can live from a mobile app to a mobile app and still tie the value proposition all the way back to the kind of initiating action that the user took.
Yeah.
And so like all that technology, that's ours. The design language, that kind of that modal that popped up on Acorns, that's our framework as well, but is highly customizable.
Okay. Cool.
But largely speaking, we're not looking to brand button. We're looking to create a seamless experience that habituates users to an action that is more valuable back to the publisher.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And can you tell me a little bit about what a company like Acorns wants to achieve with this sort of functionality? Why do they come to you guys, and what do they want to get at the end of it?
Yeah, so we work with with kind of, we run the gamut with all the fintech
Yeah.
players, and I think all of them are looking to solve a similar set of challenges, namely, how do we create a more valuable experience for our consumer base, our users, to habituate them to an action or set of actions that make the platform more valuable, both to the consumer, but also potentially open up a new revenue line back to them. And then importantly, through that habituating use case, come back daily for transactional values, come back to find deals, come back to engage on some commercial intent. The other value propositions that those fintechs have suddenly become more valuable as well because they're engaged with more often.
Yeah.
So Acorns is well, everybody's a unique snowflake, but they are also looking to solve a very similar set of challenges.
Sure. I think it's a common thing we have in the UK here, where the big play for a lot of UK fintechs in particular is to move towards that marketplace model, and then so they're all taking big steps towards API integrations and facilitating these partnerships via sort of these third parties like TrueLayer and things like that.
Yeah.
Is this in a way a similar thing that you guys are trying to do? Do you think? Are you trying to sort of link up APIs specifically, or is it a different type of rail?
What is the Shakespeare thing? An API by any other name?
We have never had Shakespeare
quoted. Well, it's still early.
My English degree is delighted, I can tell you.
Oh, perfect. I know our chief financial officer will probably laugh back at home, but so we have an SDK that's embedded within kind of the publisher ecosystem, where through that Rails, through that technology, we're able to kind of read all of the logical conditions that express what set of interactions should exist for any given retailer on that platform. And while like any publisher and any retailer, merchant, kind of exchange those names there, can create a relationship one with another, more and more over time, we're trying to create a marketplace which is kind of a bit obfuscated, where those relationships just exist, the technology exists under the covers, and the offers and kind of what's manifested to the end consumer on the publisher ecosystem is dynamic and kind of tailored to the individual as opposed to the entire construct there.
Okay, and so this must possess its own product sort of challenges in a way. So are there any particular methods which your guys and girls will sort of approach and typically use when they're sort of trying to facilitate these link ups between the products?
Yeah, so we have. Let me see how to try to answer that question. So our technology, our interface allows for those linkages to exist kind of from a logical perspective, which is to say any retailer, any publisher can work together against a set of constructs, and our technology just means that it'll work out of the box, so to speak, those linkages, those relationships one to another. Where it gets challenging is when any individual publisher, any individual retailer doesn't want to embed our technology, and we have a partner engineering team that works directly with those either merchants or publishers to build the solution to allow for that linkage to exist.
Okay, so these are sort of partnership to like focus people.
That's right.
Look after that sort of thing.
That's right.
Cool. And are there any particular roadblocks which they might find themselves encountering quite regularly? What kind of challenges do they overcome on a daily basis, your guys?
Yeah, more and more, and for good reason. We get into the conversation around data, and especially in Europe, and soon to be in California, and I imagine the rest of the world, will have a tremendous amount of kind of visibility on what data is being leveraged by whom, and for what reason, and for how, and how does it manifest, and who has control over it. And so we're in a set of discussions around that on a regular basis. Sure. I'm really happy to work at a company like Button, which takes the stewardship of data very importantly, and really has built a culture of transparency, and we don't appropriate data for any reason other than that which our partners have declared and created visibility back to their consumers on, and only to engage a better experience.
Okay. Just to go back to what you just said a minute ago there then, about California specifically. So is this, sorry, I don't know much about sort of data in California, but this is set at, this legislation is set at state level?
So yeah, the United States is wonderful. We don't have our Brexit though, so like, is that allowed to be talked about?
Of course.
Yeah, perfect. We'll come back to it. I'm getting lots of head nods. We don't have countrywide legislation in the United States with respect to data privacy, and that's just because our Congress is wonderful. But California has passed legislation called CCPA, I think California Consumer Privacy Act. Don't quote me. Look it up on Google, they probably know better. But that goes into effect in January of this coming year, and that is, for anybody familiar with GDPR, not dissimilar. I think there's one additional complexity there which allows for any individual to legislate if they're aggrieved, if you will, which adds some complexity, but it's roughly the same thing.
That's fascinating. Okay, we have an interesting situation here in Europe whereby we had a piece of legislation called PSD2, Payment Services Directive 2, which allowed this great sort of opening up of third-party information, and then GDPR was sort of seen as a sort of like a response to this, you know, in the sense of like PSD2 becomes the sort of the great liberator of data, and then GDPR is the thing that's put in place to say, okay, well, now that we've got this liberation, here's the thing to put it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and so back, I think, to the tenor of your question with respect to California, while we don't have kind of a country or national standard with respect to data stewardship in the United States, when GDPR has gone into effect, and you know, more than 1 billion people are now under the protective. Is it protective? Is that what it?
GDPR, General Data
something.
Well,
there's more than 1 billion people under that, and now with California, with 40 million people in the United States about to fall under that standard. We're pretty much like tipping over to this point where privacy first and privacy always is the standard by which every company should be operating.
Okay, brilliant, cool. So with that, we have a cool set of tools that are going on in the background of Button, which allow you to sort of with your customers, they can sort of start to manage and sort of see what's going on in terms of the kind of the insights layer. So this in this video we're going to take a look at the sort of the publisher of the dashboard. So in this, we've got this sort of insights layer, as you can see here, a cool set of like tiles which can show off some summary data, some sort of line graph information, event trending, that kind of thing. Sort of goes a little bit back to what I was trying to sort of broad brush paint you as the general growth and data guy.
Yeah.
But this seems to be like a really strong sort of dashboard for publishers specifically. I think we can see here the publisher is the active state here.
That's right.
And then the kind of the information that the user gets here is all pretty kind of substantial.
Sure.
Right. So based on this, I was going to ask you a question, which is this B2C to C? But it seems like you've described it as a two-sided marketplace. Yeah. That seems a little bit more kind of reasonable, actually, when you're talking about that sort of sideways direction.
Yeah.
But that idea of like operating in the space of you're not quite B2C, you're not quite. Is it C to B to C? And am I getting?
No. It's good. I think we have some of these debates internally as well.
Okay.
We are a B2B company. We sell a value proposition that doesn't necessarily require, or really doesn't have any manifestation of button to the end consumer.
Sure.
That said, the value falls on top of experiences which optimize commerce, that make the transaction more seamless, that a user engages with. And so the sell to a publisher really is on the basis of, one, connectivity into an environment where you can light up commerce, kind of an out-of-the-box experience, but two, where the layer of optimization, where our what we call attended install, which routes a user effectively or opens up a browser which we control, like drives a better experience. Consumers engage with that. But that's not button selling to the consumer. That's button selling a value proposition that a consumer engages with.
And then three, I guess, what else is going on is that you've got this dashboard. So not only are you providing the links between these different companies, but you're also providing the insights by which they can make better decisions.
That's right.
And later on, we'll talk a little bit about audiences. But right now, this sort of on a very basic level, you have as we saw there, a nicely populated dashboard. You're providing insights to your users. How do you decide which insights you give, what sort of things they want, and what's going to be really valuable to them?
Well, one, talk to them. I think people often forget that their clients know what they want. But it's one of those things that is often forgotten, but critically important. So we talk to our partners. We want to know what they want, and we try to translate that back into product value. But the other thing that I think is critical here is in the context of us kind of sitting in this two-sided marketplace and having a value proposition which is somewhat unique in that we see a value proposition both on kind of the retailer, on the merchant side, and on the other end with the publisher. We're in a position to abstract a set of value that none of these companies would otherwise have an opportunity to see. What companies should they work with, on what conditions, on what financial terms, what incrementality can we provide back to them, what experiences could they dictate to their consumers which are unique and new. And I wish we were doing this in 6 months, because our insights dashboard would look quite different, and we're kind of reimagining it right now around that kind of unique opportunity for these companies to scale their efforts, as opposed to just an analytics dashboard would help them read out on the performance. Does that distinction make sense?
For sure, definitely. And so are these sort of standard set of inputs? Because I guess one of the interesting things about audiences is the customization ability, which we'll see in a little while. But in terms of to quote that other great poet, the Grinch, one man's garbage is another man's potpourri.
Oh, perfect.
So the sense of what kind of what are we keeping that sort of set, the dashboard, or is it customizable, that kind of thing?
Right now it's set, but more and more it'll be customizable. But we already have an ability for our partners to export kind of the raw level data that a lot of companies today just want to kind of bring that in-house and slice and dice it with their BI tools. And so that's definitely something that we offer.
Cool. Okay, I just want to roll off a few sort of statements from the website when I was reading about it, and I want you to talk about this sort of a few of these if possible.
Please, yeah.
So, reliable mobile order attribution, or attribution rather.
Attribution is good too.
My English degree is put to fine use too. Install bounties for app installs.
Yeah.
Support for homepage and product links.
Yeah.
So this sort of, again, the tracking and experimentation, those were the keywords that jumped out at me throughout the entire thing there. Why are these phrases so important to your customers? What do they get from this? Why this seems like a very defined set of messaging to send to these people, right?
Yeah, and thanks for calling that out. I think in the space in which we exist, especially for partners in the fintech space, they both need, and their customers need, the confidence that when an action is taken, it will both resolve to a value proposition which they expect, but importantly, where the loop is tied together so that whatever reward or incentive or value proposition was presented in the mobile sphere, whether it's in-app or in mobile web, is actually attributed back to the app. Because even though sometimes we're talking about a few cents here and there, the value proposition for a lot of these companies is really built on top of that kind of experience at scale.
Yeah.
And so a missed order here and there is just a requirement that we can't live with, or a value proposition that our solution mitigates against, where I don't know how familiar you are with kind of the general axiom or principles within the internet, but generally about 5% of links are kind of eaten into the ether, where they don't resolve themselves to close the loop. And so we've spent the last 5 years really building a technology which kind of enforces near perfect fidelity on an action leading to a value proposition which is reported back to that initial action.
That's fascinating. That's in a way that seems like a real driving force for you guys.
I mean, it's important. It's clear that our partners benefit from it, but importantly, the end consumer benefits because the expected outcome is achieved.
Sure. Perfect. And so now to dive into what you mentioned just finally, a little bit of the around the sort of the customization and the ability to sort of, and of course we'd love you to come back in 6 months to talk about this in some more detail, but right now we'll take a look at the audiences feature. So this new sort of, it's in beta, that's the first thing to say. So we've got this ability to drag and drop some files into platform. You can see that there. We name it and then we describe it, and these are real sort of really clearly defined audiences that your users are going to find value in. And then we've uploaded them, and we can see them there as a sort of a segment. They're ready. They can be uploaded. They can be spoken to directly. That sort of thing. So this seems like a step into the 2020s for you. Like this is the next thing for you guys in terms of that. That next level. But so from a Medium piece, it said being able to provide customers with value exactly at the time of need. That last sort of part of the sentence there really struck me as interesting because so many people just talk about providing value to users. No one says at what stage.
That's right.
That seems important, right?
It does.
Okay. So could you tell me how you've defined this?
The
time of need.
Thanks. It's important to take maybe a step back and understand kind of the loyalty space or the affiliate space a little bit. And we're not an affiliate company, but we work kind of on the rails that a lot of these companies have constructed. It's a wonderfully effective channel. I think the last study I read by Forrester said something like $70 billion is going to be transacted through this channel in 2019. But nearly 100% of it is static. And what I mean by that is it's a set of relationships that are architected between publishers and between brands or merchants, where the offer that you see or I see are likely the same, where they're built off of kind of these offline models at best, if not, kind of a finger in the air,
Sure.
kind of waving it back and forth and trying to kind of like land a dart on a bullseye. But oftentimes that leads to a lot of kind of wasted spend.
Okay.
One of the things that we're trying to do is really represent some of kind of the best practices that exist in other performance marketing channels and bring them into this space. And at the moment of need or to the right user at the right time represents kind of a paradigm shift in this space. And one of the things that we're doing with our audiences product is allowing these retailers to kind of predefine or dynamically define kind of a set of logical conditions or users that should achieve a specific value in the moment in which they're taking an action.
Sure.
And so we're excited to be on that journey. I think working within this space can really build a tremendous amount of efficiency, which grows kind of the overall market.
Okay. Is that where the cost dynamic comes in? Because the other thing that was mentioned there was the amount of money spent on performance marketing.
Yeah.
So how does the audiences hope to change that particular?
Well, I hope to grow that pie. The more effective you can make a marketing channel in terms of its performance back to an advertiser, the more they're going to spend.
Sure.
And being able to tie this value proposition to incremental value, where the spend through this channel is measured as additive to both the top line and the bottom line for a business, becomes hypercritical.
Okay.
And importantly, when this overall pie grows for the marketing spend that the merchants are looking to kind of transact on, this in turn becomes a value proposition back to a company like Acorns, which is likely to see bigger marketing spend flow through this channel and affect their overall experience as well.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, so any expected sort of user behaviors you'd think from the product, the audience's particular product, and sort of talk a little about the demographic. So in terms of what kind of people are you expecting, what maybe people within the business are you expecting to use it?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think some of the companies that we work with have a performance marketing team, and they're comprised oftentimes of deep data science and analytics individuals all the way through to kind of the brand marketer that are looking to work together to affect the top line spend. And we work with those folks at various companies that are looking to engage with us on a similar value proposition that they have with other channels. We'll also work with other companies where the product manager, whether it's in growth or in kind of a revenue function, kind of interact with this value proposition.
Okay, awesome. And so just to round off, I'd love to kind of get your final thoughts on, so we've talked a lot about the kind of the next steps for you guys. But just quickly summarized what you're excited about at the moment, what you think is going to happen in 2020 for you guys.
Yeah, the thing that's super exciting to me is that our mission to make business better in mobile is acutely aligned to the time and place in which we exist today, where commerce or actionability that leads itself to a monetization end state for both publishers and for the merchants is just aligned much more with what a consumer is expecting than an advertisement. And don't get me wrong, I worked in advertisement for the last kind of 10 plus years at companies like Pinterest and at Facebook, and there is a time and place for an advertisement, and it's been proven to drive value, and it's got its place. But this ability to meet a consumer where they're navigating the world now with their thumbs and taking and expecting actions everywhere they're engaged with, like embedding a commerce value proposition, that's what 2020 and beyond looks like. And our CEO likes to say, look east. And you look at a company like Alibaba, where I think 70+% of their revenue is actually transactable revenue that's coming from a user buying something where they get a percentage of that. It's kind of the inverse in the United States. I think 90% of Google's revenue is advertisement. 90+% of Facebook's revenue is advertisement. More and more of Amazon's revenue is now advertisement, although they've already started with the commerce side on the other end. But the consumer, and what's exciting to me, is the expectation and where Button fits in relative to where we're going.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for coming on, Jonathan.
Thank you for having me.
That's been awesome. I hope you guys have learned as much as I did today. Certainly picked up a load of tips there, so thank you, man.
Yeah.
That's all the time we've got for today, so thanks for stopping by. Tune in next week when we'll be showing you a few more insights and user journeys. If you want to see more of 11FS Pulse, so the sort of journeys that you looked at today, head over to pulse.11fs.com where you can request a demo. If you've got any questions about the product or want to suggest a journey for us to include on the platform or in this show, hit us up on pulse@11fs.com or find us on Twitter @11fspulse. Jonathan, where can people find out more about you and what you're doing at Button?
Yeah, usebutton.com.
Okay, perfect. So I guess we'll see you guys next week. Really looking forward to seeing how you guys get on. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Homescreen is a show about all things product and design, where we showcase some of the best examples of user experiences from the 11FS Pulse research platform, which includes over 2,500 user journeys from financial service products around the world.